Alcatraz, Devil's Island, The Rock. This infamous prison has a name rooted in the Spanish language. La Isla de los Alcatraces directly translates to Island of the Pelicans, and though I'm unsure, I take a guess as to say it's because nothing ever gets off this rock but the birds. Located just off the coast of the San Francisco Bay, this island housed America's worst criminals. Many men tried to escape, but as the story goes, no one gets off the rock. Unfortunately for the 4 men who attempted a daring escape, they were not the Pelicans. However, we do have a set of 4 men who thought they were just like the Pelicans of old, taking to the skies in an attempt to leave the wretched realm. Though much like our real-life escapees, they flew too close to the sun, ultimately failing to escape. They ran around the twisted halls in a time loop, damned to fail for eternity. Today, I'd like to take a look at 2 famous depictions of Alcatraz and compare them to the real-life location and events that unfolded there. Later, we will discuss an old movie based directly on a novel about the escape, but for now, join me as we wander the halls of Mob of the Dead. One of the biggest differences right off the bat is that we don't see the main characters of this story escaping on a raft. Oh no, we watch as our characters fly away on a makeshift plane made with parts from the laundry, the warden's office, the docks, the infirmary, and the big spiral staircase. Some of the parts require multiple people to help collect them, as well as the warden's key. With parts spread all across the map, players must work together to navigate the tormented hallways and build the plane. This is an incredible way of showing that the escape took help from everyone in the prison. The part in the laundry room is especially cool because John England worked in the laundry room at Alcatraz. Though they didn't source any of their parts directly from the laundry room, they did use it as a place to pass off contraband to one another. When it comes to the part in the warden's office, it could be a reference to the actual warden of the prison not being present at the time of the escape, as he was on vacation, thus making the associate warden the acting warden.
Ain't that swell?
The part in the infirmary is especially interesting to me because of a movie scene we'll discuss later about a previous incident at the prison involving a man's hand. Though the plane part isn't a direct reference to this, a sort of 2 birds with 1 stone approach came in the form of the Golden Spork side quest in a room adjacent to the one with the plane part. If one enters afterlife mode, they can shock a spoon in the wall, referring to the inmates chipping out of the back of their cells with spoons. Then, go to the kitchen and grab the fork with the Hell's Retriever, another item in the map that not only helps in your fight against the undead, but acts as a sort of way of telling the player that these characters are truly doomed for eternity. If they think that they've ever finally escaped, Hell opens its mouth back up and swallows them whole. It's only after Al redeems himself that they are finally freed, which I believe refers to Alan West, the man who was left behind at the prison during its famous escape for not being able to squeeze through the hole in his wall due to a metal bar, confessing to a decent bit of information. However, he did make sure not to give the investigators too much, trying to give the boys a fighting chance.
Alan West had to acknowledge that he was part of it because there was this huge opening in the back of his cell. He provided some details, and he did not provide certain details. He told them what was safe to tell them.
The Easter egg, that is the overall objective and story of the map, is incredibly well tied back to the escape as well. Being this specific developing team's first time making a map, they really went all out on trying to sell the atmosphere, which I think they did extremely well. They could have tried to make Alcatraz but with the same type of vibe as Breakout, which still would have given it an inescapable and eerie scene. However, they chose to make it in an alternate universe where the warden makes a deal with an all-powerful being known as the Shadow Man, who in the warden's eyes is the devil. The warden's devilish writing can be seen all around the prison, and the whole thing looks like it was pulled straight from the pits of hell. Body bags lined up and down the showers, tubs full of blood in the infirmary, and a blood-red lighting that makes the whole thing feel like it was a Freddy Krueger film. They chose to make you see the futile and inescapable nature of the rock in a different way. Instead of showing you insanity, they chose a world built on it. Going back to the story of the map, you have to enter a ghostly afterlife mode that allows you to traverse through the walls, shocking generators to power on doors for new areas. These new areas often house parts for the various buildable items, and the plane of course, all of which is a great reference to the real-life crowdsourcing the prisoners did during their stay at the Rock. The afterlife system is also an interesting and fun way of referring to when they finally escaped by climbing through a vent and up the pipes in the walls behind their cells. You then must ride the plane 3 times, which I'm unsure why that is a step, other than maybe it's a reference to only 3 of the original 4 getting out of their cell with Alan West being left behind. Doing this will also spawn audio logs around the map that allow us to hear the quote-unquote real story of these prisoners' time at Devil's Island from the viewpoint of Officer Stanley Ferguson.
It's believed that Arlington, aka the Weasel, somehow convinced 3 other inmates that he had devised a foolproof plan to escape the rock. It was a plan that would see them literally taking to the skies on a makeshift aircraft of Arlington's own design. Just how the Weasel managed to convince these hardened criminals that such a plan was even possible remains a mystery to this day. What is known is that no such plane was ever built. Instead, the group's plans for freedom soon descended into bitter argument and infighting. Armed only with makeshift weapons, Finn O'Leary, Sal DeLuca, and Billy Handsome lured the unsuspecting Arlington to the roof, where they intended to exact a bloody and violent revenge. And so it was here, beneath the dark and stormy winter skies, that the hapless Arlington met his grisly end, bleeding to death on the cold concrete roof. For their participation in the murder, the 3 collaborators were sent to death by electric chair. Justice came swiftly. On the morning of January 19th, 1934, the execution order was carried out.
And now, as your team boards the plane in afterlife mode, both you and your characters know that this is the end for them. In one final epic stand, you fly to the Golden Gate Bridge, crash land, and have an epic battle between one player as the warden and the other 3 as the inmates. There are 2 different endings, one in which the inmates win and the cycle of damnation continues, and another where Al finally kills the others and breaks the cycle, leading to the events of a later map, Blood of the Dead. The way the developers made you feel the same way the inmates did when they had their stay at the Rock is truly amazing. It was Jason Blundell's first time leading a project, and he knocked it out of the park. This map sparked my interest and obsession with Alcatraz all the way back when I was 10 years old in 2013. Without it, I would be nowhere near the person I am today, and I'm thankful to be able to look back at that memory with fondness, knowing the developers took the time to really piece together an accurate and mesmerizing recreation of the real place and event in their own light. Now leaving this hellish mirror world and back into the real one, I want to take a look at the movie Escape from Alcatraz. Released in 1979, this movie depicts the real-life escape attempt made by the Anglin brothers and Frank Morris. One thing I noticed was that in the movie, Morris started out working in the library. According to the documentaries I watched and the FBI, there are no reports that he ever actually worked there. He worked maintenance, and because of this, he was pretty much the backbone of the operation. He often swept and painted up in the rafters, catwalks, and inaccessible areas at the top of the prison, fixing it up. He, somehow, was able to convince the guards to hang 40 to 80 blankets up, blocking him from sight while he worked, which is absolutely insane to me. He claimed it was to stop dust and paint from falling onto the surfaces and people below, but it was just to hide him and his other friends' work up there. This is why they did all of their work in making their makeshift rafts, life vests, and paddles up in these rafters. Before we get too far, I do want to comment on Litmus and his pet rat. They did not exist in real life, but in Blood of the Dead, a reimagining of Mob of the Dead, the character Al is turned into a ghostly bird. I just thought it was interesting that both the movie and the game decided to give their leader some interaction with a pet. It almost makes you feel bad for the character, hoping that they do escape and you can see a little bit of humanity still in them. That is, until you remember that the Anglin brothers robbed a bank with a toy gun for $19,000 and escaped their previous prison, and Al was a con man. He was grimy, and he got the nickname the Weasel, which is another animal reference that was not ever mentioned in the real escape. Another thing this film did really well was show how helpful the other inmates were for their escape. In one scene, Doc gives a flower to Morris. He did this as a symbol for hope, and I also do believe as a sense of motivation, reminding him that outside the walls and beyond the depths of the rock, there were still things worth living, and better yet, escaping for. I really liked this way of showing how everyone helps. In a documentary I watched, 2 former inmates at Alcatraz both spoke about an inmate's willingness to help another escape, even if he knows it is futile. I do think it's weird that they had John work in the laundry room for the coats, as it was reported that inmates actually willingly gave over their coats for the plan. He did work in their clothing department, and it was very helpful, as it was a hotspot for passing contraband off detected, as we talked about earlier.
Myself, when I was a prisoner here, anyone that attempted to escape or wanted to escape, I'd help them all I can.
That's the way a good inmate does. He helps another inmate any way he can. You know? Whether you want to go or not, if you can help him, you'll help him.
Another thing that I thought was an absolutely crazy detail to throw in there was the painting inmate chopping off his own fingers. This is a clip that I mentioned previously while discussing the map Mob of the Dead. It was a reference to the real-life event that happened at the prison years before the escape, when Rufus Percival, an inmate at Alcatraz from the years 1937 to 1948, cut off his own hands at the beginning of his sentence. He was later diagnosed with schizophrenia, and although the movie changes it up a bit, it's still a great way of referring to the incident that happened with Rufus. Now, the timeline of events doesn't really match up, as Morris was sentenced to Alcatraz in 1960. This doesn't take away from the fact that it was still a crazy thing to mention, and something I had never heard of, despite being fascinated by Alcatraz for years. Come to think of it, I'm not really sure why it took me till now to finally watch this movie, as it is an absolutely incredible depiction of the real-life escape. Seeing the inmates pass the spoons from one cell to another was a pretty fun and wholesome scene. The hand cutting was a crazy reference that really took me off guard, and Morris slowly gathering all the pieces and crafting his plan bit by bit was all done super well, and although the movie is kind of slow, it's probably just a sign of the times, as it's about 50 years old now.
You wouldn't know talent if it looked you in the face.
Well, I'm looking you in the face, and I don't see jack shit.
The slowness of the movie adds to the feeling of dread for Morris. The actor depicting him, Clint Eastwood, did a pretty good job showing Morris trying to think of a way out from minute one. He was told multiple times that no one can or will ever escape the rock. He takes this and thinks on it, while over the course of 2 years slowly theory crafting up a plan. And though this movie is relatively short by modern standards, the short dialogue and overall slower pace of older movies at the time helps it feel longer than it is, for better and for worse. The only gripe that I have with this movie is only showing the escape from the perspective of Morris, when the Anglin brothers played a pretty big part in the escape and made it out as well. They were replaced with characters who filled the same role, just minorly and very off-screen. However, this doesn't take away from the overall story of the film, and all in all, it's an incredible movie, and I'd definitely give it a watch if you've got 2 hours and wanted a pretty faithful take on the escape. Alcatraz has been one of my special interests for a super long time, and seeing its reputation in media as an inescapable, hellish compound that houses America's rowdiest dogs has been nothing less than captivating. There's a rumor about a new Escape from Alcatraz movie coming out soon, so if that turns out to be true, I can't wait to see the House of the Devil reborn once again. If you learned anything new about Alcatraz, or anything I got wrong, please comment down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time as we board the Titanic for a voyage of despair.